Okay, let's unpack this. If you are involved in high-stakes real estate development, I mean, whether you're launching luxury pre-construction units, say in Dubai, or maybe handling a specialized medical conversion somewhere like Zurich, you face the same fundamental problem.
Right.
The developer absolutely cannot afford, really, to drop the list price. But the high net worth buyer, they are just hardwired to demand a discount, especially in pre-sale situations.
Always.
So this deep dive is our shortcut, really, to understanding how these sophisticated data-driven negotiation strategies can lock in those critical early sales without just giving away the margin.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area because we're really looking at the financialization and standardization of the sales process itself.
Right.
The mission here, I think, is to understand how top developers are successfully treating negotiation not as some emotional back and forth, the typical haggle.
The usual tug of war.
Exactly. But as a structured, almost like an economic signaling game. We're focusing on a specific, integrated approach often deployed by firms, well, like the one founded by economist Dr. Ghamari.
Okay.
And he uses technology to structure scarcity and, crucially, to prove value right up front.
And the stakes, well, they could not be higher, which is where the data really kind of punches you in the gut. We looked at sources covering a pretty significant pool of tokenized off-plan assets. I think it was around $180 million worth of transactions.
That's right.
And the findings are just crystal clear. Developers who concede those seemingly small early discounts, like 3% or 5%.
Yeah, it seems minor.
Right. They erode a massive 14% of their project's lifetime margins. 14%.
And that 14% figure, it's not just the discount itself, is it? It's the cost of the precedent you set.
Wait, okay, I need to zoom in on that for a second. Why 14%? That seems high. If I give a 3% discount to the first few buyers, shouldn't I only lose, 3%? Where does the extra damage actually come from?
Well, it really comes from two places, primarily. First, you've got price anchoring.
Okay.
Those discounted prices. They basically become the de facto comparable sales data for the next phase of buyers. So it forces your hand down repeatedly.
Ah, I see. It resets the baseline lower.
Exactly. And second, the developer signals perceived weakness. When the market sees you moving on price early on, they think, they have wiggle room.
Right. They smell blood in the water.
Precisely. And they will press you harder and harder as the project gets closer to completion. So these sophisticated tactics we're discussing, they're fundamentally designed to avoid that signaling cost altogether.
Got it. Okay, so the cost of capitulation, it's kind of exponential. So the first move then in this structure game, it's about how you deal with a savvy buyer who is, like we said, programmed to probe for leverage.
Right.
The strategy, according to the sources, is replacing that generalized scarcity messaging, the old only a few left line.
Which nobody really believes anymore.
Exactly, replacing it with something called anchored transparency.
Exactly. You stop telling people units are selling fast and you start showing them, ideally verified by a neutral third party.
How?
Well, the crucial mechanism here is pushing a live dashboard. This is often powered by proprietary ledger technology, maybe blockchain.
Okay, tech-driven.
Yeah, and it shows real-time reservation velocity. You actually give the buyer access to this market movement before the first meeting even happens.
Oh, interesting. So when they walk in the door, they already know the score, basically.
Yes. When they see actual uptake, validated maybe on-chain, meaning the data is transparent, its immutable urgency gets created instantly. Why? Because the market has signaled its approval. They are no longer really negotiating with the sales agent. They're kind of competing against the market itself.
What's fascinating here is just the sheer speed the sources document. Like, take that specific case study from a Dubai mid-rise development.
Yeah, that one was striking.
They achieved 81% absorption in just 11 days. 11. With 0 concessions given. And that was right after it was made transparent that 37% of Phase 1 units had been reserved in the first 48 hours. The scarcity, it literally sold itself because the data was just undeniable.
It moves the negotiation away from a contest of wills, salesperson versus buyer,
right,
to more of a contest for opportunity. You're appealing to their FOMO, their fear of missing out, but you've armed it with objective, hard fact.
Oh, okay. So Once you've anchored the price using that data velocity, the next hurdle is, well, the inevitable demand for a discount.
It always comes up.
Always. So instead of just shaving, say, 3% off the cash price, the strategy is to, and I'm quoting here, bundle non-monetary value that costs the developer pennies but registers as premium in the buyer's mind.
Yes.
What does that kind of value substitution actually look like in a high net worth sale? It sounds a bit abstract.
Well, developers essentially swap that immediate margin-killing cash discount for tokenized incentives.
Hold on, let's make sure we define that clearly for you, the listener. When we say tokenized, what are we actually talking about here? It sounds very, tech-heavy, maybe crypto-related.
It can sound that way, but it doesn't have to be overly complex. Essentially means we are substituting a traditional paper promise, or maybe just a verbal one, with a digital contract verified on some kind of decentralized ledger. For the buyer, this usually means pre-sale purchasers get two key things.
Okay, what are they?
First, they might get tokenized priority access to future phases of the project, or maybe sister projects from the same developer, like a digital VIP pass.
Okay, early access.
And second, maybe more significantly, they receive a fractional claim on future rental pools generated by the completed building.
Ah, I see. So the token isn't some volatile cryptocurrency. It's more like a liquid, verifiable digital deed or maybe an entitlement to future earnings or perks.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
But here's my skepticism. Isn't this just kicking the margin can down the road? Why would a sophisticated, presumably cash-rich investor prefer a somewhat complex future promise of yield over, say, 3% guaranteed cash back in their pocket today?
That's the brilliant behavioral economics at play here. It's quite clever. The sources show that the perceived value of the future yield, which was often projected around, say, a 6.2% internal rate of return in some examples.
Right, IRR. Let's quickly clarify that internal rate of return, that's the total expected return on the investment over the holding period, correct? The big picture number.
Exactly right. It's the metric that serious investors really prioritize over just the initial sticker price. So by substituting a, let's say, 3% cash discount for a mechanism promising a potential 6.2% IRR.
Like the one documented in the Ellen Times report you mentioned.
Precisely. You fundamentally change the context of the conversation. You move it away from how much money am I saving right now to how much money can this asset potentially make me over the next 5-10 years.
Ah, okay. Shifting the focus.
And crucially, from the developer side, their immediate cap rate, the rate of return based on the stabilized net operating income, it remains entirely intact.
Because they aren't losing immediate cash on the sale price.
Exactly. They aren't losing immediate revenue. They're essentially offering future shared profits, which feels very different psychologically.
That makes a lot of sense. You shift the frame from cost reduction today to wealth generation tomorrow. Okay, so that covers the price anchoring and the discount objections. But what about that classic rebuttal every single developer hears?
Oh, I know the one.
This unit is significantly more expensive than the comparable properties right next door. How do these developers effectively kill that comparison argument?
You arm your potential buyers with premium justification data before they even have a chance to bring up the comps.
Proactive defense.
Totally proactive. You turn the conversation into a data review, not a subjective debate. This often involves publishing a highly detailed, factual one-pager, maybe hosted publicly like on a blog.
Like the Ellen example.
Yes, that cites specific, non-emotional reasons for why this property commands a premium.
I love that phrase you used earlier, negotiating against facts, not feelings. What specific kind of facts are we talking about here? How detailed does this defense really need to be?
Oh, it needs to be hyper-local and verifiable. We're talking details about exactly why that specific land parcel carries, say, a 22% location premium over anything else launched in the previous 18 months.
22%? Wow. How do you justify that?
Well, they cite things like municipality-approved density bonuses, which translates directly into higher future value potential.
Okay, makes sense.
Or specific transit upgrades, maybe a new subway line, that were locked in the prior quarter and are only accessible or beneficial to that particular parcel. The key is this data must be beyond a reproach, publicly available if possible.
That's a really fascinating inversion of the usual process, isn't it? Instead of waiting for the buyer to bring up the cheaper competition down the street, you preemptively justify your price by providing this overwhelming, almost technical documentation that proves why the competitor should be cheaper.
Precisely. If a buyer is essentially forced to negotiate against a public document that proves factually, that proximity to a confirmed subway extension is worth 22%.
Yeah.
Well, they tend to drop the emotional haggling pretty quickly.
Yeah.
They're forced to accept the market reality you've laid out for them.
Okay, let's pivot now to maybe the most challenging buyer segment, the high net worth holdouts. You know, the skeptics.
Ah, yes, the wait-and-see crowd.
Exactly. They're waiting for maximum market certainty before they commit. They're willing to wait out the pre-sale period just to see if the market improves further. This is where the strategy introduces something called the future upside clause.
Right. This tactic is designed specifically to mitigate that market timing risk for the buyer, but crucially, without reducing the developer's immediate revenue.
Okay, how does it work?
The developer agrees to lock the unit at today's list price, so the buyer gets the benefit of the current, potentially pre-sale pricing. But then they add a specific provision regarding future appreciation.
And what is that provision exactly?
Well, the provision typically states that if the independent appraisal, done at completion of the project, exceeds the original list price by more than a certain threshold, let's say 7%, for example.
Okay, a buffer.
Right, a buffer. Then the buyer splits that excess appreciation, the amount above the 7%, perhaps 50-50 with the developer.
Okay, so let me get this straight. If the unit appraises at, say, 10% more than the purchase price, the buyer keeps the first 7% gain entirely, and then the extra 3% is split. So the developer gets 1.5%, and the buyer gets the other 1.5% on top of their initial 7% equity gain.
Correct. That's the typical structure. The 7% threshold, or whatever number they set, serves two purposes. First, it compensates the buyer fairly for taking the early risk.
Okay.
And second, it directly ties the developer's potential extra profit to the project's actual performance and appreciation. It aligns incentives.
Did the sources show this working in practice?
They did. They highlight this mechanism being deployed quite effectively during a Zurich medical office conversion project.
Tell us about that. What happened there?
Well, this was a scenario where the target investors were particularly cautious about the future demand for that kind of specialized commercial space. It was a bit uncertain.
Right.
And there were 4 high net worth skeptics who'd been sitting on the sidelines for months, just watching. Once they saw this future upside clause modeled out for them, reportedly using something like the ALAN scenario engine,
Okay.
all 4 signed contracts within a single week.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. It essentially guaranteed they wouldn't suffer from buyer's remorse if the market suddenly surged after they committed. They realized they were essentially buying guaranteed participation in any unexpected future appreciation.
Which drastically lowered their perception of risk.
Exactly. It took that, what if I buy too early, fear off the table.
That's truly a highly sophisticated risk-sharing mechanism, isn't it? It turns market uncertainty from a deal killer into almost a mutually beneficial betting mechanism.
It really does. It directly addresses that fundamental human fear of committing too early and potentially leaving money on the table later.
Okay, so that brings us nicely to closing the deal itself. This final tactic, well, it seems utterly counterintuitive at first glance. The sources suggest you actually drive commitment by making the exit incredibly easy. It's what they call the commitment paradox of frictionless exit.
Yeah, it does sound backwards, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But think about most real estate reservations. They tend to be sticky.
How so?
They often involve cumbersome bureaucratic paperwork, delays with wire transfers, and sometimes really painful, slow refund processes if you change your mind.
True. Getting a deposit back can be a nightmare.
Exactly. So the strategy here is the opposite. You enforce a very short, firm ratification window, typically maybe just 72 hours.
Okay, tight deadline.
Very tight. And it's backed by a fully refundable, say, 5% digital deposit, often using proprietary digital wallet technology like EE Gold was mentioned. The short window forces rapid decision-making. And the frictionless deposit removes the psychological hurdle, the fear of getting stuck.
Wait, hang on. If the deposit is fully refundable and the refund process is truly seamless, almost instant, why wouldn't the buyer just reserve it, hold the unit off the market for 72 hours while they shop around more, and then just pull out easily if they find something slightly better? Doesn't that hurt the developer?
You'd think so, but here's the psychology. The pain point they often fear most isn't necessarily the loss of the 5% deposit itself, especially for high net worth individuals. It's the hassle.
Ah, the administrative entanglement.
Exactly. The administrative burden, the potential legal friction, the time wasted. When they know with certainty that if they change their mind, the refund will process literally in under 4 minutes, maybe on-chain.
Okay.
Their deep-seated fear of commitment just plummets. They think, well, I might as well sign now and secure this unit I like. If I truly regret it in 48 hours, I just press a button and my money is instantly back. No fuss.
Ah, I see the paradox now. The very ease of retreat paradoxically encourages forward motion. It's a really clean psychological trick, actually.
It is, and the sources confirm this has a drastic impact on conversion rates. Close rates on these specific timed offers across one Caribbean portfolio that was studied, they rose by 29% compared to the traditional open-ended reservations that allowed buyers to just drag their feet indefinitely. When you remove the friction, the decision just happens faster.
That is a really powerful, integrated array of strategies, moving all the way from initial transparency through tokenization, justifying premiums, sharing upside, and finally to frictionless closing. Let's quickly synthesize the core lessons from this deep dive for you, the listener. These seem like the really practical takeaways for protecting margin in these high-stakes sales.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the overarching theme really is structuring your entire sales process to negotiate against objective data points, not against unpredictable human emotions.
Yeah.
So the first critical lesson seems to be about financial vigilance. Always track every single concession you refuse to give and model the margin you save at the project's end. That data helps reinforce the discipline needed to hold the line.
Good point. Internal motivation. And secondly, that initial step we discussed, publish live absorption metrics, ideally using verified ledger technology. Scarcity, when it's proven factually, it sells itself instantly. No hard sales pitch needed.
Third, use those short, firm deadlines like 72 hours, backed by fully refundable, rapid digital deposits. It forces decisions and eliminates that administrative hesitation, that fear of getting bogged down.
Okay. Fourth, and this feels like a major behavioral shift. Arm your buyers with overwhelming premium justification data. All those technical details about zoning, transit access, density bonuses, give it to them before they even ask about the cheaper competition. Preempt the comparison.
And finally, perhaps the golden rule. Never give an immediate cash discount if you can avoid it. Instead, swap that cash for something like tokenized yield, that promise of future fractional earnings, or that future upside clause that shares market appreciation, risk, and reward. You shift the entire focus from a discount on today's cost to an increase in tomorrow's profitability.
We've seen how leveraging technology, things like blockchain and dashboards, combined with applied behavioral economics, can completely structure an entire sales process. It's designed specifically to protect margins against that natural human instinct to haggle and seek discounts. It really does feel like a complete game changer for developers.
It really does. And, this raises a bigger question, I think.
Yeah.
If these sophisticated negotiations increasingly rely on transparent real-time data to bypass emotional haggling and kind of eliminate uncertainty, how long will it be until every major high-value purchase, whether it's real estate or maybe even specialized manufacturing goods or luxury items, is determined primarily by published data velocity and these quantifiable value mechanisms rather than traditional interpersonal negotiation skills?
That's a fascinating thought. What stands out to UA listening right now about this idea of negotiating purely against facts instead of feelings? Is that the future? That's certainly something to mull over.